G'day, everybody. Thanks for joining me at the Biker Bar. With me today is founder and CEO of Savic Motorcycles and creator of Australia's first high-performance electric motorcycle, Dennis Savic. Welcome to the Biker Bar.
Thanks for having me on.
No worries at all. Today, I want to talk to you about Savic motorcycles and the C-Series, and then I want to talk to you about electric motorcycles in general. And if any of our audience has questions, I encourage you all to add your questions to the Q&A as well. Dennis, do you want to give us a little bit of background about Savic motorcycles and how that came about?
Yeah, sure. So I guess long story short, like if you want to go right back to the beginning, I got the idea of building my own bike when I was in high school, like in a metalwork class.
Sure.
And I did a bunch of sketches and worked out what parts I need to buy and all that kind of stuff. Worked out how much I had in the piggy bank and went to the teacher and said, "Will you help me weld this frame up?" And he just laughed and said, No, you need to be an engineer for that. And so that's what kind of took me down the engineering path. And I guess I started building bikes straight after uni. But we weren't just, excuse me, like wasn't from the perspective of, I just wanted to customize bikes. Like I wanted to design and develop my own production vehicle and build an automotive business. And I guess electric was part of the equation from quite an early age as well. Like from when I was about 16, I was sketching like little electric cars and stuff. And
yeah, right.
The thing I liked about electric vehicles from my own perspective was the freedom they gave in the design. So if you look at, internal combustion motorcycles, a lot of the bike is centered around the engine.
Yep.
It's obviously the heart of the bike, and or you have to go full fairing, and there's a lot of beautiful petrol bikes, out there. I'm not, saying that petrol bikes aren't beautiful. I think there's a lot of stunning ones. It's just they wouldn't allow me to create something from a blank sheet of paper.
Right.
I'd have to start with something. And so, I just combined the engineering and design side of things, into one passion. And Dave Hendroff is our lead designer. He came on board and he's been the mastermind behind the aesthetic design of the C-Series. And when we both started, I had no idea about automotive development, and he hadn't really designed a bike from the ground up before. So it's been a few years now of just learning off each other. And that's kind of where it all began.
That's awesome. Do you have some slides to share with us?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. So for people that do know of us, or for that do or don't know of us, I guess that the purpose of these slides is just to share some high level info with you. So in terms of where we're at right now, because we do get this question quite often, so as of today, which is the 10th of June 22, we have a bike with Bosch at the moment. So we have two prototypes that we've built at the start of this year, and we're about to commence building our first 5 production vehicles. So what you see on the screen is the second of the 2 prototypes that we built, and that is going on its maiden voyage today. We've had a few delays and had to re-engineer some stuff, but I can go into a bit more detail later. Mm-hmm. As it stands, it's a little more complete today. This was without the bodywork on it. But as you can see, we've tweaked the design from last year and added raised handlebars and a bunch of other things. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And we thought it was important to also communicate where we're going. We think people might not know what our vision for the business is, and basically we don't see this business as as staying a small business. We do want to grow this into a large, serious international motorcycle competitor. Mm-hmm. Our long-term target is to grow to a production volume of about 60,000 units a year and have a nice big portfolio of products that we're developing, and we've already started designing future products and things like that. So obviously we're not going to get there over the next couple of years. It's going to be a staged process, and for our next phase, or our next set of targets, is once these first few production vehicles are built and delivered to customers, we're going to be scaling our manufacturing in Australia. So all of our vehicles, so I'll be very, very clear and transparent on that. All of our component manufacture, most of our component manufacture is done overseas in various markets, and that's a combination of China, India, Italy, Netherlands, like all over the place. And then we import all those components separately and assemble the bikes ourselves in Australia. So we just want to make sure that the quality is right and customers are getting a good product. So look, that's our next phase of growth, and we plan next year to establish a facility that can produce up to 5,000 vehicles a year. So yeah, it's very exciting times.
It's very cool.
Really looking forward to it. So a little bit about the C series for people that might not know a whole lot about it. Basically 0 to 100 in 3.5 is our target. As of today, we are almost there. We still have some small amount of tuning to do. The weight of the production vehicle is going to end up at around 260 kilos. The battery pack size is between 16 and 17 kilowatt hours. So what that means in terms of range is roughly, depending on how fast you ride it and the weather conditions, if you're cruising on the freeway, about anywhere between 120 and 150 kilometers. If you're just riding it around the city at slower speeds and things like that, it's a lot more. You probably get 200 to 300 kilometers of range on a single charge. So yeah, that's about it. I mean, we've got a full touchscreen instrument cluster that we've actually designed and developed ourselves. So all of the software for our vehicles done from the ground up. It's completely IoT connected, so we can see the status of your vehicle at all times. We also have the ability to push over-the-air updates to the vehicle. So if we develop an algorithm that gives you more range or more power or what have you, and we can literally hit a button and send it to all the vehicles, and customers will have the ability to choose whether they want a particular update or not. So yeah, it's definitely a technologically advanced vehicle. We have tried to design it as beautifully as we can. We quite like the look of it. Hopefully people agree with us, but I will tell. So yeah, that's a bit about the bike itself.
Oh, that's very cool. So how customizable is the bike? Are people going to be able to do their own thing with it, or
Look,
I know that's going to be a question that's going to be thrown out there at some point.
Yeah, sure. We do try and keep that in mind. Like we have to. So from a design perspective, we've actually designed the bike to be quite modular. So what that means is that it's quite easy. If we bring out another seat and somebody wants that, it's a few bolts and you can just do it yourself. We are working on a new headlight shroud. So basically that'll be a bolt-on replacement with a fiberglass type finish. So there's a few things like that we're working on. Handlebars. Of course, there's going to be the builders out there that build a totally different subframe or delete all the bodywork and go to some kind of hyper naked or rewire some of the low voltage stuff. But we have to keep in our minds the fact that we do want this to be a production vehicle. We do want to produce 200 to 500 over the next couple of years. We need consistency as well. So we have tried to give customers a reasonable number of options. And that's going to grow with time as well. We're very focused on getting the bike to market, getting it commercialized, getting all our compliance in place. If we focus all of our resources on options and customization now, we we don't have anything to customize. So
Yeah, of course. And how does it feel to have built Australia's first high performance electric bike?
um, yeah, look, I mean, I do get snippets of a feeling where it's very rewarding, but most of the time, we're in the trenches, right? Like there are engineering problems to solve that keep popping up that we didn't anticipate.
Sure.
There's a business to run, which in itself is stressful at times. It does feel amazing, but you know how like, when people say, oh, thank me when it's done kind of thing. So,
Yeah,
so for us, delivering our first customer vehicle, that's going to be our moment where we go, oh, wow, like we did it, and so if all goes well over the next 6 months, that'll be at the end of this year. And yeah, that's going to be a big sigh of relief, like a massive milestone.
that's very cool. And the C Series won top prize of the Victorian Premier's 25th Design Awards here in Australia. That was this year, as well as the product design category. What was that like?
Yeah, it was good. So we applied for the Good Design Awards, and we won the engineering design category, and were got some kind of recognition for product design as well, which was very, very flattering. And then we got another email about the Premier Design Awards, and we thought, we've already won this. Like we probably don't need to. We were very busy at the time. We thought, we'll probably just give this one a miss. And then I got a reminder email the night before the applications were due.
Yeah.
And I called we have a written content creator or a writer.
Yeah.
I called him up and said, the questions are pretty similar. Should we just do this now? We submitted it, and the awards night was awesome. We had a bunch of the team there, and we won the product design category in that area. And then we were celebrating pretty hard. We thought, no way, like that's crazy. And, I wasn't terribly good at school, and I managed to scrape through school and scrape through uni. And I mean, now I've got a couple of degrees, but I was never really like the award winner, growing up. And so like to win that in the Victorian Premier Design Awards was awesome. And then we won like overall winner for the whole thing at the end. And so we celebrated very hard that night. It was it was awesome. Everyone was definitely on a high.
I guess it makes it feel worthwhile, and you're on track.
Yeah, it's the recognition's awesome, because I mean, my days are normally 14 to 16 hours. Like we work very, very hard, and a lot of the team, we work public holidays, weekends if we have to.
Yeah,
it's not unheard of for us to pull all-nighters, prior to an event or a launch if we need to get something done, and the team do it with a smile on their face and rest up afterwards, so it's like, I'm really glad the team got that level of recognition. It's more than I could ever give them.
Yeah, that's very cool, and well done.
Yeah, cheers.
You mentioned the design of the bike earlier on. But during that design phase, was it always the goal to maintain a somewhat traditional look for the bike?
Yeah, it was. So, so I've been asked this a bit, because I mean, you see a lot of new entrants, let's call it, into the e-motorcycle market, and want to design like the next Tron bike or something. And like I love that. I love the cool, funky concepts, and I'm a big fan of manufacturing. So like, that kind of standardization, consistency, and you look at bikes and they've been designed the same way for a long, long time. And so I think I inherently, and maybe it's a bit of bias, question futuristic designs and go, okay, how realistic is that? So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, I'm a big fan of like retro mod, like builds, right? Like I love seeing like an old school Porsche with like all new tech in it. I just think that's I mean, it's kind of sad they don't still build cars like that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think that would be so cool. And so, there was that. And then, Dave and I put our heads together, and one of the criteria of the design brief was timelessness.
Right.
So, and we realized we're both quite passionate about that. And maybe that's why we like retro mod type things, is because they've got this timeless classic design with technology in it. And we thought, okay, this is kind of what we have to do. And then one of the benefits is that it's easier for, people that ride traditional motorcycles or combustion motorcycles,
Yeah.
to look at our bike and look at their bike and go, okay, it's different, but it's not terrifyingly different. It's not completely new. They're still somewhat familiar. It just happens to be electric. And so we've definitely got concepts for very out there designs, and we're working on a few things in the background. But we thought we would start with one of the things that we're most passionate about and that customers would be most familiar with. So
yeah, sure. And you've got an Alpha and a Delta version that you're creating as well. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So initially, we started with the hypothesis that we would have the Alpha, Delta, and the Omega.
Mm-hmm.
So they're three variants of the same model, different price points, heavily driven by the different battery pack sizes and performance specifications. Mm-hmm. So the Alpha, 60 kilowatts, the Delta's 40 kilowatts, and the Omega was going to be 25, so that it fit in that lambs category.
Right.
Now we deleted the offering of the Omega because we actually didn't get a whole lot of orders for it. It was priced at 13 grand, which is a very expensive learner vehicle. And so we thought, okay, people don't actually want this particularly, and we did get a few Omega orders, so we're going to honor those and deliver, custom built basically Omegas. However, we may or may not have something coming that will replace that kind of market segment.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, so that kind of leaves the Alpha and the Delta. So the price point of the Alpha is 26,990 and the Delta is 19,990. So we've tried to price them relatively competitively and give them a nice design and good performance.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's one of the things that comes up potentially as an issue is price of electric bikes and without sort of going into a sales pitch. I mean, that seems like it's a reasonable price for an electric bike.
We set at the outset we looked at the market and we said, well, we want to be a premium brand and deliver premium products. Yeah. But we also want to be reasonable in our pricing and mass market premium is kind of like the criteria. And so we benchmarked against a whole bunch of bikes, and then we said, right, well, that's what we need to offer it to customers for.
Yep.
Do we have a business case? Because our thoughts were, well, if we charge much more, we might not sell any, and then what's the point?
Yep.
And we knew that getting to that business case that makes sense is going to be staged. You're not going to be a highly successful, profitable business at the very start. We knew that, we're not going to make a whole bunch of money on the first, 50, 200, or even 500 bikes.
Yep.
But then as the volume grows, we can invest in slightly different manufacturing methods and bring our business costs down while still offering, price competitive, good performing product at the same time.
Yeah.
So, that was our philosophy on that.
Yeah, cool. And when we think about electric motorcycles, we think about silence. Is the bike completely silent?
No, it's a common misconception. I mean, even tire noise on the road, people don't really think about, because you've normally got an engine rumbling between you and the road.
Yeah.
But that's quite noticeable, especially it depends on what tires you've got as well. But we have a a slight hum from the motor when you're at speed. I'm not going to try and replicate it on a recording. That'll end up on YouTube or something. And then with our belt drive, there's a small amount of noise that comes from the belt and the pulley interaction. And so that combined with the motor hum and the tire noise, is actually, you definitely hear it when you're on the bike, and even when someone rides past you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are some of the special features that are incorporated into the bikes?
Well, like I mentioned before, the IoT and the instrument cluster capabilities is one of the features that we're most proud of. Just it's hard to articulate how much work goes into things behind the scenes, because all you see is the physical and the tangible. But there is a enormous cloud infrastructure that our teams developed in the back end to prepare us to scale. Because if you're pulling data from 2 or 3 or 10 bikes, like, it's not that hard to manage. If you're producing and delivering 50 bikes or 100 bikes a quarter, the data import and processing grows quite quickly. So there's a lot of work that goes into that, and then the vehicle software has to all be right, and there's enormous work that goes into that. So I think feature wise, we love that. We really like the where we've put the charging connector. It's on the opposite side to the kickstand, so when the bike's leaning, you can plug it in from the side. And the way the lid kind of pops open is awesome.
It's a nice feature.
Our design is very passionate about getting things looking right, but still functional. And I mean, our removable cowl's pretty awesome. So a lot of people don't know, but we have a pillion seat and the cowl's removable. Look, I mean, there's probably a couple of other things that our CMO will remind me that I've missed. It's kind of all that comes to mind. Adjustable handlebars. So with the clip-ons and the risers, you can adjust them to the height that works best for you. And
that's very cool. And I like the idea of the touch screen interface as well, to make it easy to adjust things when you ride without having to toggle things and those kinds of things. So
one cool thing that's going to be coming out later this year is our app. So when the software team's developing it now, and I hope I'm not committing them too early, in what we're working on, or something we're working on in the background, is being able to plan your route on your phone before you go and jump on your bike, and actually sending it to your bike, so that when you jump on, your map and your route's already loaded, and you can just take off and go. So it's a few user things like that we're working on in the background.
And I could see that'd be a very handy feature to have. Are there Are there any other updates that people can do themselves over the internet?
Not immediately. Like, it's going to take time to build. We're a startup, we're early stage, and where we've gotten to on the budgets we've had to date is quite impressive. The team have put in a lot of hours on top of what they're required to do to make things happen. So the short answer to your question is, like, yes, we intend there to be updates that people can do themselves.
Sure.
It is going to take us some time to get there. I mean, on the instrument cluster, you'll be able to manually change, if you want to set your own torque limit, or how hard you want the regen to be, and tweaking your bike like that.
In
terms of, like, one idea we've got that we may or may not do in the future is, have different like skins for your instrument cluster. So you actually prefer a different instrument cluster design. You can pick it and send it to your bike and customize it that way. So I've probably said too much already. It's just things.
I guess that's one advantage that an electric bike has over a traditional bike is that things these updates can come, like you said earlier on, they can be sent to the bike and things can be adjusted sort of almost on the fly, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I think from an instrument cluster perspective, like petrol bikes probably could do it. I think it kind of depends on the company.
Yeah.
Like we're very heavily software focused, and will be more so as we grow. And one of the primary things that differentiates Tesla from other automotive businesses that aren't that way inclined is, yes, they build cars, but they're very much a software business as well, and have a very strong software development capability, because the whole industry is moving that way.
Yeah.
So we think that's how we're a little bit different as a business.
Yeah. Okay. And I think you mentioned December or something where you're looking to roll out the first bike. Is that where it's all going to start?
Yeah. So step one will be to deliver that first bike or two to customers, and then of course we go into the Christmas period, so everyone goes on holiday.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping to continue customer deliveries early next year.
Yep.
If all goes to plan. So yeah, we currently have two facilities, I suppose, in West Melbourne is where we're located. So we have a small pilot factory, and then next to that we're currently building out our showroom, and then we've got offices upstairs in the building next door.
Yep.
So in that location is where we will be able to deliver the first production run.
Mm-hmm.
And then simultaneously, as that's happening, we'll start establishing a larger facility to get us ready to scale.
Yeah, right. Hey, we've got a question that's come in from one of our attendees.
Oh.
First of all, he says, sensational to see an Australian-made electric bike. Huge kudos to you and the team. He asks, what's your strategy to compete with the inevitable high-volume competitors in Asia?
Okay. So obviously I can't, share a huge amount publicly, but I think you've got to very clearly define what you mean by high volume. So there are manufacturers out there that produce millions of vehicles per year, like quite literally millions. And, they're a very high volume, low margin business. They don't need to have a lot of margin on their products because they sell so many and have the business that way. Then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got very low volume, high margin businesses. So, if you look at custom bikes, or even in the overall automotive industry, companies like MV Agusta would be considered a low volume, manufacturer. They produce anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 units a year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they require higher margins to cover their operating expenses and stuff like that. So it really depends on what you mean by high volume. And I explain all that because, we're not going to compete with a company that produces, 20 million units a year off the bat. It's not going to happen. But I think as we scale, the question we need to answer is Ducati considered a high volume, business? Because if you look at Ducati's production volume, which is 50 to 60,000 units a year from my research and understanding, relative to someone like, I think Kawasaki does 1 million units a year, and Honda might do I think they're in double digits of millions, or 9 to 12 million units a year.
Yeah.
So, does that classify Ducati as a high volume business? Are you just looking at the premium motorcycle market segment, or are you looking at the overall? So I think in terms of where we compete in general, we kind of, our hypothesis is that people generally fall in love with the design of a motorcycle.
Yeah.
I think that's something all motorcyclists share, and have in common is, oh, I love the look of that,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's that's what brings us all together, and I think really fuels the passion for riding. And so, aside from the experience and, going around the twisties and all that kind of stuff, but when you walk up to your bike, you go, that's my bike,
Yeah.
So we really focus on that. And, some people hate the look of the C series, and that's totally fine because design is subjective and it's up to your own taste and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
but we've had a lot of good feedback, and we think that if we continue on that path and place design, very highly in our priority
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to vehicles, that's one way that we think we can compete. Even as if we were to, move into a higher volume market, we'd still design a product that looks premium, even though it might be a more affordable product and have that design element there. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's the technology side of things and all that kind of stuff, but that's kind of probably the primary one.
Yeah, cool. Hey, what I want to do now is I've got a series of questions here. It's mainly about electric motorcycles in general.
Sure.
That seem to come up a bit, and you seem to be the right person to talk to about it.
I'll do my best. All
right. Take as much time as you need answering these two, by the way. They're quick to ask, but maybe not quick to answer. All right, we'll start off with an easy one. Do you need to change gears on an electric motorcycle?
Depends on the manufacturer. So there was a bike called the Bramo some time ago. They folded or sold a while ago. Anyways, they had a 6-speed gearbox because their hypothesis was people want to, they want an electric bike, but they still want to be able to change gears. And I don't think that was the right hypothesis. I think one of the things that's awesome about electric bikes is how simple and easy it is to ride and not having to worry about a clutch or anything like that, and less maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So at the moment, no. Most electric bikes, I think, on the market are twist and go and no clutches. I think that down the track, we will possibly see 2-speed electric motorcycles, because if you're direct drive like we are, there's a trade-off between torque and top end speed. You can't really have both without a drastic gearing ratio, and then even then it's hard to control. So I suspect that in the future some electric motorcycles will have a low gear and a high gear if you do want to go faster than 150 k's an hour or something like that. So our top speed is about, we still need to verify it with a test, but we suspect we'll get something between 170 and 190.
Okay.
And that's because we have a top rating or a maximum rating of our motor speed, and we're direct drive with a gear ratio, and selecting that gear ratio depends on a few factors. But if we had a 2-speed gearbox, you could just gear down and blast up to 300 k's an hour or something like that.
Right.
Hypothetically.
Yeah.
So short answer is no. Maybe at some stage down the track, yes.
Okay. Does the bike maintain the same power as the battery drains?
No, it doesn't. So the equation for power is P for power equals VI, right? V is voltage, I is current. So now, whilst you might be able to put out the same amount of current, your voltage will decrease as your battery drains, and so by default, the power you can put out is less. Now, how technical do you want me to get? Do you want me to get quite nerdy or leave it there?
Go for it.
Okay, so one of the so in that equation, I kind of mentioned, current can be constant. It's not entirely correct. So the way batteries work is when you buy a cell from a manufacturer, they will give you a continuous and a peak discharge rating in a unit called coulombs. So they'll say, okay, this battery is 1C continuous and 10C peak, right? So now if your battery cell has a 100 amp hour capacity and you have a 1C continuous discharge rating, it means you can discharge at 100 amps continuously without an issue. If it has a 10C peak discharge rating, and they normally give you, a number of seconds associated with what peak means, then 10C of a 100 amp hour cell is 1,000 amps, right? So when you're looking at cell selection in a battery pack, you kind of look at those variables amongst others before you decide what's going to work for you or not. So then that discharge rating together with the capacity make up the I in P equals VI. So, our system voltage is 144 nominal. And then our peak current at the moment is, actually, I don't know if I should go into that much detail about our bike. So let's work backwards. So our bike's rated at 60 kilowatts of power. And our nominal voltage is 144. So by that, you can work out what the current rating is. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer to a relatively simple question.
Still good. All right. With combustion engines, you'd look at the CCs as an indication of power output. What do you look for in an electric motorcycle?
Good question. So normally you'll look for power. So how many kilowatts? Because CCs, they're actually not an indication of can they do more or less. You might look at horsepower, and there's a direct relationship between horsepower and number of kilowatts. So now, like there's a number of factors in a combustion engine vehicle that will result in more power, like compressions and things like that. So that's one factor. If you are seriously, concerned or interested in acceleration, then the number you actually want to be looking at is rear wheel torque. So, a combustion engine goes through a 6-speed gearbox. And that kind of gives you certain power at a certain ratio, which then gives you rear wheel torque. Now, obviously, petrol or combustion engines have a torque curve, whereas electric motor torque curves are quite instantaneous, and then as you increase speed, the torque curve drops off for a few reasons. But I think if you wanted to do a direct comparison between CCs and electric vehicles, try and get an estimation on how many kilowatts the average 600 or 1,000 cc bike puts out, and compare kilowatts to kilowatts, with the understanding that electric vehicles are instantaneous and have no gear switching at the moment. So even though the kilowatt number might be lower in terms of peak, it's a lot more consistent and continuous. So it's hard to give them a like for like comparison, because combustion engines vary so much over the time period of an acceleration event. But that's probably the most thorough answer I can give, is compare kilowatts to kilowatts. But there's some other differences in there too.
Okay. And are electric motorcycles the future of all motorcycles?
That's a very look, then, in this kind of question, you start to take into account macroeconomic factors, and even if you push it further, philosophical concepts that may or may not happen.
Yeah.
I think so. And the reason for that is actually probably going to be driven by the customer.
Yeah.
So four-wheel vehicles like cars, heavily driven by government regulations, and it's a lot of that's to do with emissions. Motorcycles don't really have that problem, so we're not going to get driven by well, I hope not, government requirements. Some governments have banned combustion engines from entering certain parts of cities, like especially in China.
Yep.
Even I think in Italy, there's some cities that you're not allowed combustion in the city center.
Yep.
So, I think so inevitably. I think the transition for motorcycles is going to be slower than cars. And I think it also really depends on what happens with the oil and gas industry and petrol prices. Like petrol prices are probably the biggest customer facing factor. But they're also heavily driven by demand and supply and things like that, and what's happening, cross nationally, what wars are happening at the time. So look, I think so inevitably over the next 30 years, most companies will start only producing electric motorcycles. But I don't think the transition is going to be as hard as it is for cars.
Yeah.
In terms of how sharply they change direction.
Yeah. Okay. Are electric motorcycles only suited for commuting?
Well, yeah, pretty much. I'm going to try and, give a no bullshit answer. Excuse my French, but you can take it down to the racetrack. You can take it up to the hills. However, the battery technology and the charging rates currently available and the charging infrastructure available is going to prohibit you from using an electric motorcycle like a regular petrol motorcycle. Yeah. So, a lot of our first customers, and I've spoken to a lot of them, they understand that completely, and they go, actually, I don't do 300k rides anymore. Or some people just don't. Like, I'm not the kind of rider that likes to do 800ks in a day. I'm just like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. I really have other things. Like I love going out for a solo ride, and I love doing like 100 to 200ks, maybe, 100ks for me, like I quite enjoy, and it's to isolate and get out of the house and stuff. So, for me, this kind of bike's like perfect. And we've really pushed all of the capacity we can into the space we have in this bike anymore. And a couple of things really start to suffer, and that's weight, but also, cost. It's going to cost customers a lot more to have a bigger battery. I think battery technology is changing very rapidly, and over the next 10 to 20 years, I suspect new tech batteries that have a much larger energy density, more capacity in the same amount of space, will become commercially viable. And so if you can, over the next 10, 20 years, go for 500, 600Ks on a single charge, and it costs the same as a petrol bike, like that's a game changer. But the reality is, on a motorcycle with current battery technology, we don't have the real estate for it, nor is the charging infrastructure if you go out into the hills, right? Again, sorry, very long-winded answer.
It'd be quite interesting to know, and I'm not asking you to answer this, but it'd be quite interesting to know how many people actually only go to work and back. It seems to be a question that comes up a lot with electric motorcycles. Well, I can't travel to between Queensland and Sydney,
Yeah, yeah,
but are people really doing that?
yeah,
So it'd be an interesting question for people to ask themselves. Do I really,
yeah.
does that really matter to me?
Yeah, and look, I mean, to some people it really does, and
Yeah,
that's awesome. I think people, if that's what you like to do, like wicked, do
yeah,
that.
yeah,
There was a study done with electric cars when they were looking at what size do we make a battery pack in a car? Because costs, in the automotive industry, your cost of manufacture is a massive consideration.
yeah,
When I was working at Ford, like you count every cent on that car is accounted for, right?
right.
If you need to increase something by $1 or $2, like that's a big deal. You need to get approvals for that.
Yeah, yeah,
You have a very serious justification for doing that. Like a lot of people don't realize that. And when they were sizing battery packs, you look at, there were studies done to understand what the average travel distance is for a car. If you have an everyday electric car,
yep,
how big do you need the battery pack to be? And they found that, I can't remember the exact statistic, I'll get this wrong, but it's like it was something ridiculous. It was like between 80 and 95% of people on a daily basis don't go more than like 35 Ks,
yep,
in total travel. So to work and back.
yeah, yeah,
So, but the reality is with a car, you might still want to do
yeah,
a weekend trip, and you might not want to charge it every night. Like you might have to do your smartphone or what
yeah,
have you. So, I think motorcycles a bit different, and we just have our limitations in terms of what we got.
yeah. Um, and on that, I guess some of the questions around are electric motorcycles too heavy to manage?
Not really. No. No, I mean they are heavier than some bikes, but I think a lot of Harleys kind of weigh. I'm not picking out any particular brand, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The Harley Live Wire weighs 265 or 260. I'm not certain, but I gave it a test ride and it felt like a really nice. Like
Yeah,
it was, didn't feel like a heavy bike. Our production vehicles are going to weigh about the same.
yep,
And I mean, when you prototype things, they're not going to be as optimized as production. So our prototypes that I showed you on the screen before, they actually weigh 300, and we can still ride those relatively. You can't throw it around like an MT-09, right? They're just very different vehicles. And it's not an R1 or an R6. I can't remember which one. I think the R1 weighs sub 200 or just over 200. And they're a lot easier to ride around. So a lot of that weight does sit in the battery pack. The battery pack weighs between 80 and 100 kilos, depending on the capacity. So once battery technology improves, either that weight's going to come down or your range is drastically going to go up. But the weight's quite high. But the short answer to your question is no, it's not actually all that difficult to manage.
Okay. And is it true that you have instant torque and instant power on an electric motorcycle?
Yes, that's a very easy one to answer.
I think you did answer that one before. How much maintenance and servicing is required for an electric motorcycle?
So basically, we're still confirming what our service schedule is going to be. The short answer is a lot less than a petrol motorcycle. You don't have 6 monthly or 12 monthly oil changes. You don't have trans fluid or we do have coolant, but we run basically water, so we don't, because our temperatures don't get too high, we don't get boiling,
right?
So you actually don't need to change that all that much. And we think our service structure or service schedule is going to look like, first service at 1,000 or 2,000 Ks, just so we can check the bike over, make sure everything's good.
Yep.
And the next one might be 20,000 Ks or something like that. We've gone with the belt drive to decrease, chain maintenance and cleanliness.
Yeah.
Not very much is the short answer.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned range, city versus highways before. How is range so much greater in urban environments as opposed to highway riding?
So, okay, the big difference between petrol and electric is when you're static at a traffic light, you're not using any energy in an electric bike. In petrol, you've got idle, so you're still burning fuel.
Yeah.
Now, what happens is, okay, so let me take a step back. In a petrol bike, in a full petrol tank, you have X amount of energy to burn. And because you have gears, so man, that's a complex question to answer.
Yeah.
Very, very technically, but in short, there are two major things that in fact impact energy losses in the bike. And the biggest one is actually aerodynamics. Bikes have shocking aero. Like there's a lot of turbulence that comes off a rider when you're punching through the air. But what people might not know is that the relationship between drag and your speed is, I think, an inverse square relationship. So it's not linear. You know, if you're going 100 k's an hour and can do 100, it doesn't mean that if you go 200 k's an hour, you can only do 50. You might actually only get like 10 k's, because at 200 k's an hour, the losses from the aero are increasingly more expensive, right?
Yeah, right.
So when you're riding around the city, now aero doesn't actually come into play above, I'm going to get this wrong too, I think it's 40 or 60 k's an hour. I think it's 40 k's an hour.
Yeah.
You have very, very little drag because the relationship's quite, you're still in that kind of low drag point.
Yeah.
When you start getting to 60 and 80 k's an hour, that's when you start increasing. And then, 110, 120, etc. You've got more and more drag. So yeah, that's why the difference is quite high.
Yeah. Okay. And do extreme temperatures affect the performance of a bike?
Yep. I mean, just like any bike, really. We engineer the vehicle to be able to cope with, we try and foresee what worst case scenarios might be and engineer around that. But yeah, like if your battery pack is too cold, it won't charge without a heater. They have to be at a minimum temperature in order to charge.
Yeah.
Because all the liquid in them is frozen, right? So, and then at really hot temperatures, batteries can start degrading. So we have a derating strategy to make sure the battery thermals are okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're riding around on a sunny 50-degree day Celsius, and you've got heat radiating off the road as well, the ambient temperature might be, let's say, 40 degrees, but the heat coming around from the environment to the bike might actually be 60 because you got the heat radiation.
Yeah.
And so that now battery temperature shouldn't go above like 50 or 60 degrees. So you've got to then cool that and manage it. So extreme temperatures, yes, just like any vehicle, you might get some deltas in there, but they have to be quite extreme.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We're going to have one last question. How long will a battery last before it needs replacing?
Good question. So it really depends on how you've treated your battery pack.
Yeah.
If you deep discharge all the time and fast charge all the time, you are hammering the cells. It goes back to that 1C, 10C rating that I mentioned. So when batteries are tested, they're tested at their 1C rating: charge, discharge, charge, discharge, charge, discharge. And what they find is that they actually they decrease in capacity over time. But they stop testing after 5,000 cycles because they consider that infinite life. Right. Now, look, the short answer to your question is we suspect that our battery packs are not going to need replacing for anywhere up to 10 or 20 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But it all depends on how they're managed over time. And one of the things that we track via the data that we collect off the bike is what kind of charge rates, how long were they on charge, were they deep discharged, and we then have digital twins and we can plug that into algorithms and see and forecast what the health of the pack is going to be.
Yeah, okay.
And then tweak algorithms and update the bike again. So the very short answer is, we suspect 10 to 20 years, but it heavily depends on how the vehicle's treated.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that you've taken the time to come to the Biker Bar and share your wisdom. It's been great to hear about the C series. I'm excited to see it, and I wish you all the best with it. And also thank you for sharing your knowledge on electric motorcycles in general. These questions seem to come up from time to time, and it's great to have you be able to explain that for everyone.
Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. Take care.
Have a good one. See you,
mate.
When I feel like this, I'm immortal. When I feel like this, I'm immortal.